We continue to cover the passing of Kyle Busch, the number 18 car, the sport in mourning this morning, as we have heard that he died yesterday at the age of 41, at the young age of 41 years old, and was supposed to race at the Charlotte Motor Speedway in the upcoming Coca-Cola 600 this Memorial Day weekend. So a lot of questions facing NASCAR, the community, including how do you race on? Joining me this morning is Doug Rice, a legend himself, the voice of Performance Racing Network. And Doug, I understand you were on with fan reaction on Sirius last night for hours, hearing directly from the folks out there who loved or maybe didn't love Kyle.
I certainly was. I did 4 hours on the Sirius NASCAR channel along with Alex Hayden. And a big portion of that was just listening to fans outpour their grief, sharing their stories. There was some laughs. There were a lot of tears. There were a lot of grown men calling in, choked up, that couldn't get the words out. And that's what happens when people lose their heroes and folks that they look up to. And the blink of an eye, they are gone. And there was also a great deal of almost wrestling with, is this real? Is this something that actually happened? We had some people say, please tell me that there's a mistake here, and I wish we could have.
Yeah, I mean, we're coming into the newsroom this morning, and Carlene and I were just like, this is crazy, right? So, I mean, you've covered the sport in some of its darkest moments, Dale Earnhardt, others. Mm-hmm. So where does yesterday then, I don't know, not rank, but in terms of the shock you felt? It's got to be up there.
It's as big a rock'em moment that this sport has had. It is right there, and I don't want to rank, but it's the same kind of thing that we found out when Davey Allison died in a helicopter crash, or Alan Kulwicki, who also perished in a plane crash, or Dale Earnhardt at Daytona. And in some ways, this is equally shocking because he's 41 years old. He was going to race today at Charlotte Motor Speedway in the Craftsman Truck Series race and probably win the thing, because he won a week ago today at Dover in the Truck Series and got out and was the typical Kyle Busch with the bow, with his helmet on, and all the things that he does normally. And I know a lot of the people that were going to go to Charlotte Motor Speedway today were going there with the expectation of seeing him win. The shock value of this, Jane, is just, it's off the charts.
Yeah, Doug. I mean, and so with the 600 still being on this weekend, how does the NASCAR community, drivers, the crews, the fans, we see evidence of folks coming together and to compete, but when the grief is this raw, how do you just kind of hone in and use that?
It will be a subdued weekend. I don't think that can be anything but that. It is always a subdued weekend in a way at the 600 because it's Memorial Day weekend and there's so much put into honoring the American Armed Forces and the troops and their sacrifices on Memorial Day. And now you tie in the death of one of the most prominent people that we had in NASCAR. And Kyle Busch just wasn't just a very successful driver who won more major series races than anybody else, combining the top three series. It's also easily one of the biggest personalities. People that never watched the first lap of a stock car race were aware of Kyle Busch for a lot of reasons. He was outspoken, sure. He was brash, and so there's a lot of impact there. It will go on. I saw this happen when Earnhardt passed 25 years ago, but it won't be the easiest thing to do.
So you've called his races then for his entire career during part of your.
Correct.
What is your personal memory then with all the races throughout the years? What stands out in your mind?
How tenacious he was. I saw Jimmy Johnson maybe win more big races, but I saw Kyle Busch win a lot and called a lot of his wins. And Kyle was tenacious. He was as good making the car do what he wanted to as any driver I've ever seen. I will put Pete Kyle Busch's skills up against anybody else and say, okay, try to beat that. That is very memorable. and he raced without apology. He wasn't a dirty driver, but he was aggressive, and he knew what he wanted to do, and he got it done a great many times. I mean, he won at Charlotte. He won the Coca-Cola 600. He won everything there was to win in this sport, including 2 championships, except like so many other great drivers, he never got a Daytona 500 trophy.
So I guess at the end of all of this, what is his legacy then in the race, in the sport?
You know, that's a great question that I asked a lot of people last night. I think his fierceness and his story arc, I believe, is his legacy. He came in this brash young kid from Las Vegas. That's not the typical pattern to be a successful stock car driver. Raced at Hendrick Motorsports early in his career, won some races there, never had the big success. Moved over to Joe Gibbs Racing, and he was just a powerhouse. That's when he started winning multiple races every year and winning 2 championships. But he was always the black hat guy. He embraced that role. He was the guy that everybody waited to boo at driver introductions. And when he won, they let him know. And he told me one time, he said, I asked him, I said, why do you always wear your helmet when you do your victory celebration and bow on the front stretch? And he goes, that's the only time NASCAR fans will get rid of their beer, is to throw it at him across the catch fence. And I said, I get it. But then something happened along the way. He went to race for Richard Childress based out of Winston-Salem, which was Earnhardt's shop where he won all of his races. And he mellowed as a person. He became a dad to 2 children. And that changes people. And that maturation process over the last 3 or 4 years, he went from being one of NASCAR's best black hat, in the wrestling world they call them heels, villains, to beloved. And even when he won the truck race at Dover recently, the crowd there went crazy and applauded and yelled his name. And there was an embracing of Kyle Busch and an appreciation for how good a guy that we watched race all those years. And I think that story arc, to me, is just simply remarkable.
Yeah, agreed to see him now not only embracing that villainous role, but yeah, being the loving father, a guy's guy, a woman's guy, a kid's guy, you know, the whole gamut. For Richard Childress' team now to see 2 of the most legendary names to lose, you know, the Dale Earnhardt and now Kyle Busch like that. What does the team do? What is that garage like?
It's got to be somber. It had to be tough for everybody down in Welcome, North Carolina, to go into that shop today saying, well, we know we have to go on, but their hearts may not be in it for a while. And for Richard Childress, he's a tough guy. He is a rugged individual, but even for somebody like that, this is a lot to pile on. You lose arguably one of the most popular, best drivers ever in Dale Earnhardt, and a quarter of a century later, you're going through this all again. It wasn't quite as public. Kyle did not pass away on the racetrack like Earnhardt did, but here it is. It was a championship caliber driver who had, in the last month or so, his performance level had picked up. And people were starting to say, maybe he can make it into the chase. Maybe he can get to be playoff eligible. And there was so much talk about that. I don't know. My heart went out last night to Richard Childress and the people there, because here they go again. They're going through that same grief cycle and struggle of, why are we doing this again, even though this wasn't directly related to what went on the racetrack.
Right, for sure. And so do they park 18 for the race? Well, there was some talk with Austin taking over the seat.
Kyle races the number 8 now. He made the 18 famous for Joe Gibbs Racing. I make the same mistake. And he's racing the 8 now. No, they are going to race that car this weekend. And a guy named Austin Hill, who is a very successful driver in the NASCAR O'Reilly Series, our next to top level series, and has raced some in the Cup Series, will race that car this weekend. And Spire Motorsports will have somebody in the 7 truck that Kyle Busch was supposed to race, and they're going to replace him, and those cars will stay out on the track. It's it's very difficult to shelve a race team. When you do that, that affects so many layers of people. And it's kind of, nobody's ever said this. This is one of these unspoken things. It's sort of the code of how NASCAR and the teams deal with this. There's a little bit of that the show must go on mentality.
Right. I thinking the same. But like you said, we'll be somber. Was going to be a little bit somber anyway because it is the Memorial
Right.
Day remembrance and when we honor our fallen members. But with that extra layer now with a local hero.
And if I know the folks at Charlotte Motor Speedway that I do very well, I worked there for quite some time, and NASCAR, they will do the proper things to recognize the legacy of Kyle Busch and who he was. And that it will not go unnoticed. And it will be more than just the traditional moment of silence. I think there will be a great recognition for Kyle Busch and what he did because he was impactful in this game. He really made his mark in so many ways that I can promise you that CMS and NASCAR will do a proper recognition this weekend.
All right. We will continue to follow that. Doug, appreciate your time this morning and a little insight and the convo on the passing of Kyle Busch. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on it. It's nice to talk about it. It's not a pleasant subject, but it does me personally a little bit of good to chat about it.
For sure. And appreciate, you just weighing in on it. Thanks care.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. Doug Rice, legendary voice and sports and caller and just the man. So we appreciate that.